what he's up to. He's picking me like chicken, shucking me like corn, stewing me like an oyster. I mean, he ain't putting nothing down but air.
In the heart of Dallas, where legends unfold, a tale of shadows, mysteries untold, where truth is obscured in the depths of the night. The Lone Gunman podcast sheds a flickering light. On the grassy knoll where whispers reside, a shot in the dark where secrets collide. Oswald's shadow looms, a figure so grim. In Dealey Plaza where the lights grow dim, unravel the threads, conspiracy weaves. The Lone Gunman's truth when no one believes. Jack Ruby's dagger in history's hand, echoes of gunfire across the land, the echoes of chaos, a nation in grief, the Lone Gunman's quest for belief. The echoes of shots in the memory stain, a nation in mourning, forever in pain. The Lone Gunman seeks what's buried in dust, in the aftermath of a nation unjust. It's not just a story, but a deeply carved scar. The Lone Gunman's journey to see from afar. Jack Ruby's dagger in history's hand, echoes of gunfire across the land, the echoes of chaos, a nation in grief, the Lone Gunman's quest for belief. It's not just a story, but a deeply carved scar, the Lone Gunman's journey to see from afar. Jack Ruby's dagger in history's hand, echoes of gunfire across the land, the echoes of chaos, a nation in grief, the Lone Gunman's quest for belief, the Lone Gunman's quest for belief.
And here we go.
That's right. Here we go, people. What's up? It's episode number 319. We're still getting used to this, and I still don't have all the music right, so bear with us. But I figured it'd be a nice little long intro to let people get in here and get ready for the show, Joe.
Yeah, me included.
Yeah. So how was your Thanksgiving, sir?
It was great. Went over to my dad's house, and he had a bunch of people there. I brought Ruby, and we had a nice Italian Thanksgiving meal. And I'm going to share my screen right now and show. I took a couple of pictures of the food here. The Italian Borelli Thanksgiving. All right.
Food the Italians that has like spaghetti and lasagna for Thanksgiving.
No.
I see pasta and meatballs.
Yeah, well, that's the first course. So on the left, you have the kind of the start here. You got some long hot peppers on the top. You got some prosciutto, some Italian bread, some shrimp, some mozzarella, basil, tomatoes, and you kind of make a sandwich there, put the pepper on, put some prosciutto, put some cheese, and just go to town. The first course after that, second course, whatever, I guess technically first, is meatballs, sausage, and pasta. My dad makes his own sauce. And then the bird, as they say in The Sopranos. And I don't actually have a picture of that because he did it outside, but we have the stuffing, the sweet potatoes, mashed potatoes, string beans, with Ruby looking on very intently. But it was good.
So that's
For
round one.
that was kind of like hors d'oeuvres round one, and then the turkey round two, and then dessert and coffee and all that. So Italians like to do a lot of rounds.
Yeah.
How was yours, sir?
Very well, man. Very well. Had a great time. Ate a lot, way too much, as per the usual. On Thanksgiving and Christmas, you want to eat too much and sit around like a bump on the couch afterwards and maybe doze off. And that turkey has that melatonin or whatever it has in there.
Oh yeah, you're done after.
Yeah, just stick a fork in me. But love turkey. It's really the only time I eat it though is during the holidays. But too much of a pain in the ass to make it any other time, I guess, if you want fresh turkey. But let's welcome in some of our folks here, Joe, into the show. We've got Claude and Aunt Udine up in the house, cruising around in a light green Nash station wagon. Moose Heaven, Ashley, what's up? John, thank you for the super chat. As usual, we appreciate it very, very much.
Thank you, John.
Preach it like Reverend Billy Ray Hargis, Midnight Ride Sermon with Guy Bannister and General Walker. Absolutely. We are going to be preaching it tonight. That's for damn sure. Shreveport Trey is in the house. What's up,
And
Trey?
He's in Shreveport.
Yeah, for Thanksgiving.
Respect it.
They're eating out of a can, apparently. Canned turkey. Big Mike's in the house. What's up, Alpha 66? Paul Cummings is in the house.
Hey, Paul.
You met Paul in Texas, didn't you?
I did, and he bought me a pizza and a drink at Campisi's, and I gave him a shout out on the members only. I don't know if he heard that, probably not. I don't think he's a member, but thank you, Paul. He told us he couldn't figure out super chats, so he wanted to buy my dinner, which was very nice of him, of course. So I now owe you half a dinner, Rob.
That's okay. We'll make Paul do Uber Eats for Big Bad Bob.
Hi, Paul. Nice to see you.
See No Evil is in the house. Bungled is in the house. What's up, Bungled?
Bungled.
Birthday girl herself, Colleen, the Rocket Queen, is in the house.
It's her birthday. Happy birthday, Colleen.
Not today, but she had it recently. Yes. Happy birthday, Colleen.
Short belated birthday.
Yes. Let's see. Jack is in the house. What's up, Jack? Of course, Tiny Dancer is here. It wouldn't be a show without TD in the house. Howdy, howdy.
Deep State Tiny.
James is in the house. AR or not, I like that song. I know it's crazy how good that song is. Audio is good. Thank you, Trey. Tim is in the house. What's up, Tim?
Hey, Tim.
Let's see. Anybody new? I think that's just about everybody so far. Yes, the 23rd, November the 23rd was Colleen's birthday. So yeah,
everybody. Happy 23rd birthday, Colleen.
Yes, happy 23rd birthday, Colleen.
And just so people, I know we mentioned this on our members only chat on Wednesday, Rob, but we have.
If you want to hear more about it, become a member and go back and watch the show. But Joe's going to give you a little snapshot for the folks that aren't members on his little conference experience.
Yeah, very quickly. I won't yap. But I was first going to say we have switched streaming platforms because only a couple of people heard of that, from StreamYard to Restream. And StreamYard had upped their annual price to over $500. And as some of you well know, we were dealing with some audio issues, whether that was their fault or my fault. We don't know. But so we decided to go with Restream, and this is our first time doing a live here. As you can see, the chat, we could have an option where the chat comes up on the right-hand side of the screen here.
It was
And
a little easier for us to see at times. Yeah.
yeah. And it's pretty similar. We're still trying to figure out exactly how I could share things without Rob's permission. So please bear with us if there are any um,
Or show up into the studio in general.
yeah. Yeah. So definitely let us know your feedback if you positive, negative, whatever, because we're always trying our best to bring you the best quality of the Lone Gunman. So we spent a lot of time, Rob did, going through all the options we had. We decided this. It still cost a few $100s.
But still half the cost of StreamYard. So
yeah.
And so far it's been great. We haven't had any audio issues on either end.
No. Yeah.
So knock on wood.
Yep. And if anyone was wondering where your super chat money goes to, it's things like this. So we appreciate everyone that is in the position to contribute. So all right, so that's that. Last week, Rob, we had our co-partner Doug on for a Lancer preview on Friday night on the 22nd, and we actually missed it, Rob. It was our 1-year anniversary of you and me.
Yes, of us doing the show live here on YouTube. It's already been a year. What a quick year, and what a great year. We've almost doubled our subscribers in a year, which is phenomenal. Thanks to you guys for helping out, watching the show, liking the show, sharing the show. We really appreciate all your help, and we couldn't do it without you guys. And they say if you build, they will come eventually, and that's what I told Joe. I said, it's gonna be a slow burn or something new, and here we are a year later, just rocking and rolling through it, and it's only going to get better. So thank you again to all you loyal folks. Like I said, we couldn't do it without you, and we appreciate each and every one of you for sure.
Yes, thank you so much. So we had recapped the conference up to Friday. Of course, Saturday, BSDs, Joe and Doug that's big swinging, we're I just go for the eye roll. And of course, I'm sarcastic in that. We presented before Bill Simpich and after Gail Nix Jackson on Saturday, and it went really well. And I'm just going to show you a quick picture of that. Let me know if it came up. Did it come up? Bill Simpich and after Gail Nix Jackson.
Yes. Do you not see it?
I can. I have it up. So that is me and Doug looking very snazzy there. And we had a great presentation, about an hour. We had great feedback. And Rob, when Bill Simpich, who was there, says, I really enjoyed your presentation, and Larry Hancock, who was moderating the Facebook presentation, said, fascinating, great work. Doesn't get better than that, right? You can no higher praise, especially in this type of subject that we were talking about, than to have them give their compliments to our presentation. So thank you again to Doug, of course, who wrote a lot of the copy for it, and most of it actually. And we had a journey, and it was very. We found out some great things, and we might go into more of the details of our presentation at a later date. But then we had the banquet on Saturday night. That was fun. Much better food. They had like a buffet and chicken and steak and macaroni and cheese and salad, like a ton of things. It was great. Definitely better than last year, the food. And then Sunday, we kicked it off early with Daniel Sheehan, the professor, who had an interesting presentation that might be covered on future quick hits.
But when you, let's just say, when you bungle very simple facts They might earn you a spot on Quick Hits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the introduction? If you give some bullshit and we call you out on it, don't get mad, get better, something like that.
Yeah. Man,
Yeah. Yeah, I'm paraphrasing, but that.
I like that.
But still pretty cool. Then we had a nice listener lunch actually with Trey, with Paula, with Scott Edwards, Doug, and myself at the hotel bar restaurant, and then went to go see the end of Fred Litwin's presentation, which was on the Miguel thing. And I had a couple of.
And we're not going to ruin it here, but if you want to go back and watch the members only stream, Joe had a very nice conversation with Fred Litwin that I thought was hysterical.
Yeah, he's a good guy. He's a good guy. But it was nice meeting Fred and Steve Rowe also, who I know has been on here before. Then I saw Alex Harris, and I had to leave, unfortunately, for a flight before seeing Boylan and Hancock's presentation. I think it was at 3 p.m. Dallas time, but I was able to catch it on the replay. And but overall, Lancer was fantastic. It was great to meet some of our most loyal listeners. Of course, great to present in person with Doug and meet Bill Simpich and a bunch of other people in the JFK community. We went into detail on that in the members only. We'll leave it at that. But
and we won a major award.
Oh yes, major award.
Major award, research award,
Yes.
research award.
It's called a BSD award, and this was
officially BSDs.
Yes,
yeah.
And this was awarded to Rob and myself for our presentation last year, 2023 Lancer, for work done on the Payne post-assassination surveillance work. Now, bless their hearts, we did not, of course, do any Payne assassination surveillance work, but I can understand where they might have gotten confused. Of course, our big finds were regarding James Herbert Martin, who not kind of close to Marina in terms of a babysitter. And that is definitely what they meant by that. And but it's very nice for Kenneth and Gabby, who presented the award, to acknowledge
me.
Yeah, some of our finds from last year. And we had no idea. I had no idea. I'm sitting there like eating, having a drink, and I see Rob Clark and Joe Borelli up there. I'm like, huh? And thank you, Trey, who captured the picture of me going up there and getting it. But
yeah, Colleen, he is on some things, but I don't know what he was thinking in Dallas this year. But
yeah, Colleen. So he's definitely a knowledgeable guy, and he was involved personally in some aspects of Watergate, and then the Iran-Contra thing after. And probably the first half of his presentation was perfect, but then he went off on a tangent and saying it was this global cabal and Dulles and Brown, whatever, Harriman, and it just kind of went off the rails there at the end. It was like everyone was in collusion, and
a lot of Cuba information was wrong, and it's
it was he kind of went off the rails, I think is the best way to say it. But I mean, we did not give a speech, Sally. We did not, although I probably should have. You
shook a hand and got the hell off stage.
Yeah,
as you should.
Yeah. And so yeah, that pretty much wraps that up. I don't want to take too much time. We went into more detail on the members only, but great weekend as always, and just love connecting and networking, and hopefully, I met a few people that hopefully Rob could be guests on the Lone Gunman, and some that committed to it when I talked to them. So that'll be a surprise.
They just didn't show up last Friday night. That's okay.
Don't get me started on that.
Anyway, folks. All right, let's get into this show.
Let's do it.
It's operational in Dealey Plaza. These are going to be some of the folks that we have reason to believe through either testimony, documentation, supposition, or reason to actually be boots on the ground in Dealey Plaza on 11/22/63. And this is carrying out the execution and murder of John F. Kennedy in broad daylight whilst in the motorcade. And people always ask us, well, who did it? Who's behind it? These are very different questions. It also, when you're talking about a conspiracy, is a very different question of a cover-up. Who was behind? Who orchestrated a cover-up? Just because somebody orchestrated a cover-up doesn't mean that they were involved in the conspiracy of the murder. It just means that they had things to cover up. Because if you start digging too deeply into certain people that are attached to this thing, it could lead back to them, unwantingly, if you will. Now, I don't believe any of these folks in Dealey Plaza were quote unquote card carrying agents of the CIA like they're on the payroll. It's not what we're saying. At some point, they could have possibly been contracted by the CIA to do certain things, which doesn't make them an official CIA agent. These are called assets. These are called cutouts. These are called people that you can keep at an arm's length. You pay them to do your dirty work for you while you sit back and not have to worry about the repercussions of what's happening. And these things can either be done through money and payouts, big money and payouts, or people can be orchestrated to maneuvering through clever use of ideology. And what I mean by that is something that you believe very strongly in. Now, maybe these guys on their own felt this way about Kennedy, and maybe they would have never done anything at all had they not been co-opted or pushed in a certain direction or led down certain paths or had ideas planted in their head, right? By certain individuals. Thank you, Perpetual Concepts. Much appreciated. Much appreciated. Happy Black Bag Friday. Cohorts and Colleen coming through. Thank you, Colleen, for the super sticker fan character dressed as a cheerleader jumping in the air. Well, there you go. And there's Colleen jumping up in her cheerleader outfit and blessing your boys. Thank you, Colleen.
Thank you, Colleen. Thank you, Professional Concepts. You're the best.
Yes, bungled manipulators, if you will. Now, we're going to be talking about and focusing on two very particular individuals here today. This is why this is a part one. Okay. There's going to be at least two parts, maybe three to this whole thing. It depends on how it all plays out. But Joe is going to be talking about somebody you're very familiar with if you listen to the Dallas Action, Quick Hits, and this show. And that is Felipe Vidal Santiago. And then I will be talking about Lawrence Howard later in this show. But just to give you folks an idea of the kinds of things that were going on back then, I wanted to play a short clip of an interview with Lauren Hall. Okay. And this should give you an idea of the kind of shenanigans. And we've heard this before, too, from Jerry Hemming as well. And let's see what Lauren Hall has to say here, Joe.
So long before the killing of President Kennedy in Dallas, you have been arrested in Dallas or interrogated.
Yes, I had hauled a load of arms in a trailer from Los Angeles en route to Miami, Florida, or en route to the Keys so we could make our raids into Cuba. And we stopped off in Dallas and deposited these arms in a home in the Dallas area.
And that was Mr. Logue's home?
I'll say that I deposited the arms in a home in the Dallas area.
Yes. You were actually imprisoned?
Yes.
For how long?
I was in jail, I think it was for 2 days.
How did you get out?
Mr. Logue bailed me out for $5,000.
Now, why would he do that?
Well, number one, he had some things of mine out at his house.
Oh, yes, we discussed
and
that before.
He was a friend of mine, and he wanted me out of the area.
Are you still in contact with Mr. Logue?
No, I'm not.
Why would that not be?
Because I'm not in contact with anybody from Texas.
You give the impression that you wouldn't like to go to Texas at this point.
Well, if I wanted to commit suicide, I would probably go to Dallas, Texas.
Can you tell us about your meeting in Mr. Logue's office in Dallas about soliciting funds for Cuba?
Pardon me. Yes, I was in the office. There was 5 other gentlemen along with Mr. Logue and myself. It was in the office. And we were talking about donating $2,000 apiece towards a $20,000 fund so that we could form a government in exile, a Cuban government in exile, and for pulling raids in Cuba. And one of the gentlemen that was there that was in the trucking business stated that rather than donate $2,000 for the raids into Cuba and for forming a government in exile, he would rather donate to a $50,000 fund and have Kennedy's head blowed off.
Which is exactly what happened in Dallas. Okay? And trust me when I tell you that Lauren Hall will be one of the people that we will be talking about, but not this week. Probably next week we'll get into Hall a little bit more deeper. But I wanted to play that for you so you could hear Lauren Hall in his own words express the feeling, the sentiments going on in Dallas, because these guys, they're going around soliciting funds, if not, personally with a soup can in a store. They're going to these big high rollers in Dallas and other cities, and talking to these big, rich, right-wing, fascist-type people who were willing to pay them to do something. Now, whether that be like Hall was saying, for to set up a government in exile for Cuba, or to fund raids into Cuba by these anti-Castro Cuban mercenaries and the like. Joe, we watched that film of the Intercontinental Penetration Force a couple weeks ago, and they demonetized our show because of the damn music on that thing. But it showed people like Lawrence Howard, Roy Hargraves, William Seymour, Jerry Hemming, dressed up in their fatigues and going through these things and going through these exercises and training and all of that, and got interviewed and all that. These guys were quite serious about this. When you look into a lot of these people that we're going to be talking about here, like Lauren Hall, like Lawrence Howard, like Jerry Hemming, all these guys were married with kids. But instead of holding down a job and living the American dream, they decided so deeply to get involved in this situation. And by that, I mean to, solicit funds and guns and supplies and drugs and medicine and these things that are needed, when you wanted to go on raids into Cuba with mercenaries and anti-Castro Cubans, and hop in a trailer, leave their families behind, and hop in a car with the trailer and drive all the way across the country, okay? And stopping along the way, to solicit funds and talk to people and, eventually make your way from California to Florida and then actually go on these raids or attempt to. Um, Now, the first guy that Joe's going to be talking about was a former, what was he? I think he was Air Force under Batista,
He was a Navy.
former Navy under Batista, and he was a serious operator. He was the guy that got into boats and went on these raids. Now, I don't know if you can say the same thing about Hall and Howard and Hemming. It seems like they did a whole lot of nothing when it came to actually going on raids. But Joe, if you could just let's get into Felipe Vidal Santiago first off here. And before we do, I'm sure you have a photo, but here is one of Felipe Vidal Santiago, and he is talking on a giant ass walkie talkie, much like he may have had stuffed in his back under his jacket in Dealey Plaza, if this is, in fact, the dark complected man being Felipe Vidal Santiago, who a lot of people think that it was. There's definitely something under his jacket. The question is, what is it? Jackets do not get misshapen like that. You can kind of make out something like tucked in the back of his pants. With what looks like an antenna extending up, which could be pushing the corner of his jacket up.
Yeah.
I don't know for sure, but it's definitely suspect, considering that dark complected man was never identified, never interviewed, never to be seen or heard from again, actually, after 11/22/63.
Mm-hmm.
And he was actually very close to the limousine at the time of the shots. He had actually stepped off the curb. He was standing in the street with his hand raised in a fist like manner at the time Kennedy had his head blown off. So this is a very suspect person. And the reason I show you these pictures is because so you can see that these guys had no qualms, okay, about carrying weapons. And when you're people like this and you're carrying weapons, you're not afraid to use them. And most of the people that we're going to be talking about here today are those type of people that you're going to see with weaponry. You're going to see, doing these guerrilla type movements. And the reason I'm laying the groundwork for this is so you can try to follow our path of thinking. And once Joe tells you about Felipe Vidal Santiago, you'll understand why he is a prime suspect. Because we can actually put him in Dallas on November 22nd, 1963. And that's not true for a lot of these people. But this one, we can, right? So, Joe, let's get into Felipe Vidal Santiago.
Sure. And so I think a lot of our listeners are aware that our friend and co-partner Doug Campbell has done a ton of work on Felipe Vidal Santiago. And I want to see, Rob, I have a 1-minute clip from a Dallas action I wanted to play. And it didn't work in the past when I tried to play things via X, but it talks, it's Doug with Larry Hancock, and it talks about, to your point, how Felipe Vidal Santiago was operational during 1963. And, he wasn't just talking the talk, he was walking the walk. And let's see if this works. If not, I'll just paraphrase it. I already have this open. And if it doesn't, Rob, stop me, okay?
Okay.
You get the sense that not only did Santiago detest the Central Intelligence Agency, but they did not like him either.
supposedly, as a matter of fact, they had approached him when he left Cuba and essentially defected. They had approached him because he would have made a great contact with his background. And he was not the least interested in the agency. Yeah, they did not like each other. He didn't trust him, and from his perspective, and one of the reasons Sturgis was paying so much attention to him is Felipe was operationally independent, and he was one of the guys that was doing things, not talking about doing things.
Yeah, and he and people forget about Felipe Vidal Santiago too. Before he defected, he was essentially, I guess it would be the equivalent of the United States Coast Guard, but what passed as the Cuban Navy. He was in effect, on a much smaller scale. He was the naval chief of staff for Cuba. He was the chief of the Cuban Maritime Patrol. He was a big wheel in the Cuban Navy, wasn't he?
He was, and that's why I made the remark earlier. Early in '63, if I recall, several of the independent groups actually got to the point, which they didn't get to the point of this often, but they were actually going to run a consolidated mission into Cuba with half a dozen different boats, a very sophisticated operation, and they did not pick anybody from any of their groups to run it. They picked Felipe to be in charge of it because he was the one guy they all trusted.
Yeah.
And he had that kind of experience.
All right. So, did you hear that? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, oh wow, I'm glad that worked. In the past, me trying to play audio through a tab did not work. But Larry Hancock is saying that Felipe Vidal Santiago was a very trusted, independent member of the XL community. And the CIA initially tried to get him as a contract agent and did, but later realized we can't control him. He's too independent. And when you think about someone who might be involved in the Dallas action, pun intended, he fits all the boxes. So, all right, let me go to my PowerPoint here. All right, so Mr.
It's the box of ideology. This is a guy who probably wouldn't do something for the money because of the money. This is a guy who would likely do something because he believed in it so much.
For sure. However, Rob, it is noted in the documents, the FBI document that we're going to read, that he was low on money. And of course, he visited, we'll get into it, General Walker in a separate trip to Dallas in early November, trying to raise funds. Of course, General Walker didn't really have money to contribute to these type of things. And we'll see who might have given money to him. So I'm going to read a little bit, just backing up a little bit on Vidal Santiago's background. He was born in Cuba in 1926. He became a Cuban naval officer, but went to exile when Fidel Castro gained power in '59. He lived in South America before moving to Miami, where he was associated with the Interpen, the Intercontinental Penetration Force Group. Vidal became a close friend of John Martino. He also worked closely with Roy Hargraves, who might come up on part 2, and carried out a series of raids in Cuba in the 1960s. This involved the plan to create a war with Cuba by simulating an attack on Guantanamo Naval Base. In December '62, Vidal had a meeting with a lawyer connected to a, quote, Citizens Committee to Free Cuba. He told Vidal about a conversation he had with a Henry Cabot Lodge, that John F. Kennedy was exploring a plan to open dialogue with Cuba. Vidal was furious about this, about what he considered to be an act of betrayal, and immediately told leaders of the anti-Castro community and a CIA contact, a colonel by the name of William Bishop, and told all the exiles about the betrayal. And Larry Hancock argues in his book, Someone Would Have Talked, that Vidal traveled to Dallas on several occasions between the 31st of October and November 21st, 1963, in order to raise funds for the anti-Castro exiles. That included meeting with General Walker. On his return to Miami, Vidal reportedly stated that Walker had no further interest in Cuban affairs. However, Jerry Patrick Hemming claimed that Vidal obtained money from H.L. Hunt, who had been largely responsible for funding Walker's campaign for governor in Texas. Clint Murchison and Gordon McClendon also have been suggested as possible contributors to Vidal's mission. And going to skip here to a little excerpt from Someone Would Have Talked by Larry Hancock, of course. Do you say something, Rob? Okay.
Do what?
So Vidal was most definitely not a CIA employee or a contract agent in 1963, although he had been one for a time after his defection. Vidal was in a totally different category. That would be the independent category that you
Hey,
can't
Joe.
control. Yes.
You still have the slide of the pictures up.
Okay, that's fine. I'm just reading from my Word
Oh,
document.
I thought you were trying to go to the next slide. I didn't hear
No,
what
it's
you
okay. I appreciate it. Thank you. I will go there in a second. In March 63, Felipe Vidal Santiago was given legal notice by the INS, that is the Immigration Naturalization Service, and who was supposed to restrain Vidal from leaving Miami-Dade County. The INS action was part of the overall Kennedy administration crackdown on unsanctioned exile groups attempting operations from within U.S. territory. We've kind of talked a lot about this. In April of 63, Vidal was found in a boat off of the Florida Keys in violation of his INS restriction. In June 63, he was arrested with Hargraves for arms violations, but released. Now going to October 63, Vidal and Hargraves were working closely together at this point. They lacked financing and were supposedly working at developing Cuban missions out of Nicaragua or Guatemala. Vidal traveled to Dallas and stated that he visited General Walker seeking donations. Vidal spent almost 2 weeks in Dallas from October 31st, 63 to November 11th. Upon his return, he too reportedly stated that Walker had no further intent in kind of financing Cuban affairs. And Vidal was reportedly back in Dallas as of November 21st, 63. That would be one day before the assassination, still trying to raise money for his operations and still in violation of his INS travel restriction. So, before I get into the other part, let me see. Oh. So, how do we know, Rob, that Vidal was in Dallas? Well, there is an FBI memo that is dated January 20th, 1964. That is the subject of this memo is the United Front for National Liberation. And that is Vidal's little group he formed there. And I kind of screenshotted the relevant parts, and we'll read it. It is noted Vidal Santiago was served a notice of prevention of departure in March 1963. This notice prevents him from leaving the land limits of Miami-Dade County, Florida. However, in April 63, Vidal was found in the Florida Keys, where U.S. Customs seized his boat and a load of arms. In November 63, Vidal visited Dallas, Texas, without permission of INS. And on, I won't go to January yet. The Miami FBI office will maintain contact with the INS Miami to ascertain what action this agency takes against Vidal concerning his violation of INS prevention of departure rules. So This is kind of a long document, and someone MMT1 is advising on Vidal's movements, and this is
Well, Joe, MMT1, I believe me and Doug figured this out.
Yep.
Robert K. Brown, who was part of Interpen, and I believe would go on to make the Soldier of Fortune magazine, was actually an FBI informant. So
I've heard of that name, and it's also been talked about how Frank Sturgis was also informing on Vidal as well. I don't know if MMT1, the one they're referring to here, is Sturgis, but Sturgis was definitely keeping his eye out on Vidal and all his movements, right?
Sturgis wasn't actually a part of Interpen, but Robert K. Brown was. So at this time, I would probably lean more towards Robert K. Brown being the snitch.
Okay. Yeah, but the point is that these guys, including Vidal, were trying to run these raids into Cuba. Again, they were operational. They weren't just talking. They were walking the walk, risking their lives. And when you think about someone that could be on the ground in Dealey Plaza, they're not going to be conservative, right? They're going to be someone that is risking their lives on a consistent basis,
For
right?
something they believe in, yes.
Yeah, for sure. So let's see. MMT1, who was associated with Cuban exile groups interested in conducting armed raids against the coast of Cuba on October 3rd, 63, advised that Felipe Vidal Santiago continues to be the head of the United Front for National Liberation. MMT1 said that Vidal is in bad financial condition and is currently looking for employment, and has recently been conferring with Marcos Diaz-Lanz. MMT1 explained that Diaz-Lanz has been active in Cuban revolutionary matters for the past 4 years and is the brother of Pedro Diaz-Lanz, former head of the Cuban Revolutionary Air Force, who also defected.
Yeah, and these are important names you've probably all heard before with ties to this rumored ties to the assassination.
Yes, sir. And October 31, 63, MMT1 advised that Vidal talks about conducting a mission to Cuba and currently associates with Roy Hargraves, a soldier of fortune and adventurer who has been involved with Cuban exiles in Miami for about the past 2 years. On November 11th, 63, MMT1 advised that Vidal had just returned from Dallas, Texas, where he had visited General Edwin E. Walker. Vidal saw Walker for the purpose of obtaining money, donations, and support of Vidal's anti-Castro organization. MMT1 advised it is doubtful that Vidal was able to obtain any money from Walker, and Vidal has currently stated he is interested in moving from the United States to Guatemala or Nicaragua. Vidal says it's impossible for him to carry out his mission, his purpose of his anti-Castro activity in the United States. And that's because the FBI and the Kennedy administration was hampering those efforts. He complains that the United States government hinders his efforts to overthrow communism in Cuba. On November 21st, 63, MMT1 advised that Vidal continues his efforts to raise money and that he is in a bad economic situation. November 22nd, 63, Santiago Alvarez Rodriguez advised he is one of the leaders, Commandos L, and conducted raids against Cuba. Let's go ahead here. So on December 16th, 1963, Gerald Patrick Hemming advised he is the head of Interpen, an organization with 6 members. It was more by then. And the purpose of the organization was to train Cuban exiles in military tactics for eventual warfare against the present government of Cuba. Having stated that Vidal, from having a background in being in the Cuban Navy, has ability in the operation of boats. He is interested in infiltrating supplies and arms into Cuba to guerrilla forces. And then he goes on to say that Vidal lacked some military skills, but he was really a Navy guy. He wasn't known for like his shot or whatever. But on December 17th, 1963, Vidal Santiago was interviewed in connection with another matter and states he continues to be the head of the United Front for National Liberation. And let's see here. So pay attention this year. So Vidal is very upset with the United States and their interference with his work in trying to overthrow Cuba. Vidal complained that every time Cuban exile group plans a military action against Cuba, one of the group sells the information to the United States government, and the mission is stopped. Boats and arms confiscated, and the United States government continues to prevent Cuban exiles to fighting to liberate their country.
Hence, some rats in the nest.
Yep. And so Vidal was in, let me go here, was in Dallas twice in November. From October 31st to November 11th, and that's when he visited. This is from Someone Would Have Talked, Larry Hancock's timeline, to November 11th. And on November 8th to 12th is the period in which Oswald's subversive contacts are reported by FBI agent Hosty. And that is the period in which Oswald was seen at the Harlandale house, which was, of course, a bunch of exiles. Vidal reportedly left Dallas on November 11th. And but on November 21st, and I made this a little bigger, Vidal is back in Texas, and that is one day before the assassination. So when we talk about suspects in Dealey Plaza, who can we actually confirm via some of the FBI documents I just read and through some of the books like Larry Hancock? Was he in Dallas? And he was. And let's see. Hold on 1 sec. Sorry, I'm just getting my slides together here.
Yep. Let me. Tiny's commenting a little bit. These FBI documents. I know they get crazy, Tiny, but you got to keep in mind that neither the CIA nor the FBI could have ever dreamed at this time that these internal documents would ever see the light of day. They would never have dreamed in a million years that they would have to show these internal documents to the citizens of the United States at some point in the future.
Yeah, computers weren't around then.
FOIA Act wasn't out yet,
Yeah, for sure. And I just want to read something from Bloody Treason. And of course, Bloody Treason has a ton on Hargraves and Santiago. But this is actually a quote from an interview, Dirty Dick, made with Gerald Patrick Hemming. And it goes as follows. The week before the assassination, Felipe Vidal Santiago told my group, Interpen, that some people had approached him to go to a big meeting in Dallas that week. We warned Vidal and some other people not to go, that something funny was up. I'd heard of other meetings where the conversation got steered around towards hitting JFK instead of Fidel Castro. I'm talking about some friends of Nicaraguan dictator Anastasio Somoza and some people in Dallas. Hemming continues, it's hard to say exactly who this select group of Cuban exiles was really working for. Hemming continued. For a while, they were reporting to Bill Harvey's ex-FBI CIA guys. Some were reporting back to Hoover and the new DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency. There was the third force, pretty much outside CIA channels, outside of our own private operation down in the Keys, that was doing all kinds of shit and had been all through 1963. So Hemming is saying that he's warning Vidal a week before the assassination not to go to Dallas.
Yeah, and you just heard before we started here, Lauren Hall, in his own words, saying the exact same thing about these meetings in Dallas.
Yeah, for sure. And I wanted to, we had showed this for a while. This is, of course, the picture of dark-complected man sitting on the curb with Umbrella Man. And a lot of people think it is Felipe Vidal Santiago, me included. It's very obvious if you look at, he's tall, he's lanky, same type of hairline, although he's wearing a kind of beret. And he was operational. He was not happy with how the U.S. government was stopping his attempts to overthrow communism. And as we saw from the INS documents, he literally was in Dallas twice in 1963 when he was not supposed to be without INS permission.
Yeah. And one of those documents said that, or it might have been Hemming saying that he wasn't like operational material as far as a shooter, which
right.
Of course, if this is him in Dealey Plaza, he wasn't.
Right.
But
more like a spotter.
Yeah, more like a on the spot type of signaler, especially if he has some kind of communications equipment in his jacket. He could be like, all right, limo's turning the corner now, and then once the shooting started, once they hit their target, hand goes up, ceasefire type of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And let me just finish up here. So the FBI eventually went to go visit and interview John Martino, who Felipe Vidal was very close with, right? And who was sitting on Martino's couch? Well, you guessed it, Felipe Vidal Santiago, who's the subject of BU file 105-whatever. Vidal has been active in anti-Castro activities and may be one of the unidentified sources of Martino's information on Cuban matters. So you have Vidal sitting in Martino's house when the FBI eventually beginning of February, came to interview Martino. He's sitting there. And you might wonder what happened to Mr. Felipe Vidal Santiago. Well, in April of 1964, only a few months after the JFK assassination, of course, like we've been telling you, he is still operational. He is walking the walk. And this is after the January, which is a whole different story, boat bomb where Hargraves and Santiago and Dickie Chappelle, the famous wartime correspondent who was later killed in Vietnam, had to get off this boat because it was blown up by a bomb. And you have to wonder if that was the first attempt to kind of tie up loose ends in regards to Santiago. Definitely could have been. But in April of 64, he goes into a mission to Cuba. And I'm going to read from this news article. Prime Minister Fidel Castro's firing squads have shot 4 Cuban exiles captured when they tried to land in Cuba. The announcement was first mentioned of the capture of infiltrators since the... Blah, blah, blah. hold on. The men had sailed for Miami in an operation that was organized, directed, and financed by the Central Intelligence Agency. The four were executed Wednesday after a trial by the First Revolutionary Tribunal of the Havana District. They were identified as Felipe Vidal Santiago, former officer in the Navy of the dictator Fulgencio Batista, Lediciano Gonzalez Benitez, and two other names no one will know. They were captured by frontier guards, by the Interior Ministry, and interestingly enough, Rob, and this is my last slide, Fabian Escalante, who was, I guess the best way to say this is kind of like the Jim Angleton of Cuba's counterintelligence.
Yeah.
Right? Right, for lack of a better comparison. And he went to a JFK conference. I think it was in the Caribbean, I think it was 95, and spoke at this conference. And Larry Hancock was there, I believe, and a bunch of other people. And in December 95, he told our study group in Nassau, the Bahamas, I'm right, that before Felipe Vidal Santiago's execution by Cuba in April 64, Vidal told him he had been driven by CIA's Colonel William Bishop from Miami to Dallas in 63, and he met with wealthy Texans at the Dallas Petroleum Club. And that's corroborated by what Hemming said, Rob.
Right.
Yeah. And this was independently confirmed in a similar story that, like we just said, Gerald Pachter Hemming had told Dick Russell, but Hemming did not mention Colonel William Bishop. Colonel Bishop told Gary Shaw a similar story, driving Vidal from Miami to Dallas in April 63 to meet with General Edward Walker and others where discussions of killing President Kennedy occurred. So,
yeah. So, and another point I wanted to make too is that, even if there were sponsors, this is a group of guys who I've also heard the supposition put forth that there was so much interest in this thing getting done that they could have possibly got it done and then went back for some money from some of these bigwig people. Say, look, we did what you wanted. You didn't pay us to do it, but we did what you wanted. So now you can pay us, type of thing. But again, what the damage is done at that point, they didn't have to pay anything. But as we'll see when we get into more about some of these other folks, suddenly Felipe Vidal Santiago is back, with boats and running these missions into Cuba, which required a substantial amount of money to do. You need to acquire weaponry. You need to acquire a boat. You need to acquire supplies, medical supplies, and you have to have a reason for going in there. You can't think four people are going to go in there and just change Cuba and kill Castro. You got to have some kind of a plan. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that these type of things were happening as well. If it wasn't upfront money, it could have been asked for money afterwards. And as we'll see, some of these people may have come into some money at some point that the people we're going to be talking about here today, including Philippe, including Lauren Hall, including Lawrence Howard, and Roy Hargraves, who continue to run these chaos type missions well into the 70s.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, for sure. And I just want to mention that, and I know we talked about this briefly in the last episode, Rob, that Doug Campbell's article / video, because for the AARC lecture series, goes into this much deeper than we have today. And maybe we'll put the link in the show notes. But essentially, if you were to Google AARC library, Doug Campbell. It will be the first thing to come up. And for those that don't want to read it and want to listen to it, he did a whole hour and 20-minute reading of his research article, and it goes a ton into exactly what we're talking about. Vidal, Hargraves, Sturgis, everything. So it's, he really crushed it on that. So we definitely want to give him his due credit there. And I know we talked about that in the beginning of the last episode. So
Absolutely. All right, so let's get into Lawrence Howard a little bit. Now, Lawrence Howard, let me get back over here. Let's see. This is Lawrence Howard in his gorilla uniform. You see he is strapped with a sidearm and some type of machine gun, it looks like.
yeah, he was a big boy, wasn't he?
Yeah. Note the beret, Joe. Keeping company. This is him with William Seymour. Note William Seymour is holding a rifle. Okay. And this is Lawrence Howard's mugshot for violating the Neutrality Act. Him and other members of Interpen were arrested on December 4th, 1962 for violation of the Neutrality Act. This is, they were trying to get some things together to go on a raid. Somebody snitched on them again. The raid did not happen. The trailer of guns was impounded, and these guys were arrested. So, yes, this is Big Larry, Fat Larry, as we call him lovingly.
They call him the Mexican or something.
Yeah, he has a lot of different nicknames, Joe, and we'll get into
okay.
All
right.
But was impounded, and what are you playing over there?
No, nothing.
Shut that thing up. All right.
My phone.
Let's see. All right, so let's fly back here a little bit. Now, during the time of the HSCA, Lauren Hall provided sworn testimony to the committee in an executive session on October the 5th, 1977. And the following is a passage excerpt from that testimony. Question: did there come a time when the FBI spoke to you about whether or not you visited Sylvia Odio in September of 63? Yes, there was. Who spoke to you? Hall says, an FBI agent. Question: at that time, were you advised why you were being questioned about Sylvia Odio? Hall: I really don't recall. He stated something to the effect that you were ever in Dallas, Texas, and I said yes. He said, do you know a Mrs. Odio? And I said, I don't recall knowing a Mrs. Odio. I think I knew a Professor Odio, who was a professor at Texas, some university in Texas, just outside of Dallas, as I recall. He asked me anyway about the apartment building on Magellan. And I said, it's possible. I don't know. I said, do you have a picture of her? And he said, no, I don't. And I said, well, it's possible. I met her. I don't recall. He then asked me who was with me, and I told him I was with Alba and Howard. And then it was like maybe a month or two. And you told him you were there with Howard and Alba. Yes. On the first trip. Yes. We both read the same FBI report. It's directly contradictory to what I'm saying. Question: so it is your testimony that at no time did you ever tell an FBI agent that you were in Dallas accompanied by Lawrence Howard and William Seymour? Is that your testimony? Hall says that's true. Question: were you ever directly or indirectly involved with Sylvia Odio in acquiring military equipment for anti-Castro raids? Hall: no, sir, I was not. Now, the committee also interviewed Lawrence Howard on May 23rd, 1978. Howard stated that he never met Sylvia Odio. The committee also interviewed William Seymour, who acknowledged his relationship with Hall and Howard, but did not recall any details of a trip to Dallas, including meeting any Cubans there. So that's the kind of first mention, if you will, in the official record. It was added very late to the Warren Commission report. I believe it wasn't added until almost September of that year. And that's the first mention we have of Lauren Hall and Lawrence Howard. Their names are in the Warren report because of this alleged meeting. And the story goes that Hall told them this, right? And that Howard denied it and said that Hall is lying. And that's the hill that he chose to die on. And then Lauren Hall later recanted with this as HSCA testimony, stating that he never told the FBI that. But I find it hard to believe that the FBI would just make this up out of nowhere and stick it in the Warren report. For what reason?
Right.
I don't know. Now,
And
there's a lot
Lawrence
of
Howard was a very scary person. So if you said something that implicated him in some way, I don't blame anyone, even someone as tough as Lauren Hall, for retracting that.
Yeah. And of course, this little excerpt in the Warren Commission report led Jim Garrison to be very interested in Lauren Hall and Lawrence Howard. We know through documentation, we have the FBI documents, that these two, at least these two, were stopped in Dallas in October of 1963. Hall was arrested. He was driving the car. They had some drugs in the glove compartment, and I'm not sure. I think they'd already dropped off their trailer full of guns at this point.
At Logue's house?
Yeah.
Remember the audio you played? I had left something there.
Yeah.
It's very vague.
Yeah,
It's
very vague.
Even though we all know what he's talking about, right?
So, I'm just laying the groundwork, setting all this up so you can see why we think what we think. Okay, because we know Hall and Howard visited Dallas several times in October and November 1963. And you have these other folks visiting Dallas, doing the same kind of things that Vidal was doing, that Hemingway was doing. And I believe Hemingway was pissed off because Hall was going behind his back to his contacts in Dallas and trying to solicit money for his own thing, not necessarily for Interpen, right? Because if you look back and you see all the footage from Interpen, Hall's not there. Howard's there. Hargraves is there. But Vidal and Hall are not there. Mm-hmm. Vidal was more like a
independent
contractor type. He teamed up with them when it was beneficial to him, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But
still very trusted.
Yeah, I'm sure they shared information and supplies and things like this, and they knew of each other's plans to do certain things because this is what these guys did, So I'm going to play you a little snippet here. Another little snippet from Thomas Beckham. Okay.
Love it.
Here we go.
A package approximately, I'd say 2 weeks to Dallas prior to the assassination of the president to a Mr. Howard. I went into Mr. G. Ray Gill's office. I was told to go there by Mr. Ferry, which I knew real well. And in his office, they shuffled up some documents which were drawings, that of a map or plots and stuff. There were some pictures of buildings and cars, and it was was regular pictures, but they wasn't glossy. They were put inside of an envelope, at which time G. Ray Gill handed me, it was either $100 or $200, told me that I was going to be taken to the airport. I was to deliver this package to Mr. Howard, the executive in. At that meeting was Roswell, was Jack Martin, David Ferris, and a bunch of them, Sergio Concha. Also at that meeting was your Mr. Marcello was at that meeting, they were sitting on a couch. I remember the couch. Let's see now. I delivered the package. Oh, they told me one thing was made a remark was that I was to wear no jewelry, not to talk to any of the airline stewardess, to create any, draw anything to me. My good friend Clay Shaw was also there, and the envelope was put in a magazine. They got me a magazine, stuck it inside there. I took a cab from the airport to a place called Executive Inn, that's in Dallas, where I met Mr. Howard. Mr. Howard was upset because when I got out of the cab and was heading there, he tooted for me in his horn. The car was a kind of a raggedy-looking car. I got in, handed him the package, and he leaned against the door as if to face me, but the package was away from me. And I handed it to him just like it was in the magazine. He opened it up, and he looked at me a couple of times, and I fixed to look off in the other direction. And he got real mad. He said, this can't be all. This can't be all it is. I don't know the exact words. I said, yes, it is. He said, like H or something to that effect, it isn't. And I said, look, you can go call him, meaning to go call G. Ray Gill. I said, because that's all he gave me. So we drove from there about 3 blocks. He pulled over again. He reviewed the stuff that was in the package. Now, I didn't take nothing out of the package. I didn't even, except for seeing it on Mr. Gill's desk and them shuffling it up, putting it inside the thing, there was no knowledge. All I knew was photographs of buildings and cars and neatly drawn maps. Not like a regular city map, but it was diagrams and stuff drawn on paper. And at that time, to this day, I don't know, again, I think I took a cab back to the airport. Anyway, I had round trip. I went back and I discussed the fact of how upset Mr. Howard was. I discussed it with Roswell, which is A. Roswell Thompson, and also Mr. Gill. But that thing went on from there. Another subject that I know, that now this was within a span of 2 weeks prior to the assassination of the president. One of the gentlemen that fits in a thing that I know I was involved in was a thing called the organization, which we was all a part of.
All right, there you have it out of Thomas Beckham's mouth. Now, I know a lot of people might not put a lot of faith in Thomas Beckham, as his story did change from the time of the Garrison grand jury testimony that he gave and the HSCA testimony that he gave. But again, you have to remember, he does throw a lot of names at the wall, and some things may be embellished or things like that, but he specifically singles out Lawrence Howard as to be the man that he contacted in Dallas and gave this package to, full of pictures and diagrams of buildings and streets, maps, more than likely, type of thing, maybe plans. So for Beckham at this time, Lawrence Howard is still alive. Lauren Hall is still alive. These guys went and were interviewed by the HSCA. And so for Thomas Beckham to come out at this time and say the things that he said are pretty crazy. And
more significant than if both of them were dead. And he's saying that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Now, a lot of people he talks about, David Ferry, G. Ray Gill, and all all these guys are dead by then. But Lawrence Howard is not dead at this point.
You're implicating some serious people.
Right. And the HSCA knew this. They knew what Beckham said when they interviewed Howard. And they didn't mention any of it to Howard. They didn't bring it up. They didn't ask him about it. Nothing. Which is interesting.
Was that when Delsa and whoever went to California to talk to him?
Yeah.
Where he met them at like a gas station and he's like, I'm carrying like all these
Yeah, but
guns.
Delsa had interviewed Beckham and he knew Beckham's story.
That was before, I'm saying. I'm trying to just get the timeline.
Yeah, they interviewed Beckham before they went to talk to Howard.
Got it.
Now, I tried for the life of me, Joe, because let me pull this up so I don't get the dates wrong. So on December 3rd, 2014, The Real Deal with Jim Fetzer podcast.
Your boy.
Episode number 38 was an interview with L.J. Delsa, former investigator for the HSCA, in which Jim Fetzer went to L.J. Delsa's house. L.J. Delsa at this time was very elderly, but still very lucid. Okay. And they sat down in L.J. Delsa's kitchen and interviewed him for about 20 or 30 minutes. And L.J. Delsa told a very interesting story. Now, the audio of this interview doesn't exist anymore. That is, the webpage exists from radiofetzer.blogspot.com, which is that link, but the audio link itself is dead.
It did exist at some point?
Yeah. I remember I listened to it a couple times when it came out, because what it said was, the way Delsa described meeting Lawrence Howard and talking to Lawrence Howard was insane. This is L.J. Delsa, a homicide investigator for 20 years in New Orleans, an investigator for the HSCA, relating the story of flying to California, meeting up with Lawrence Howard at a gas station or somewhere down from his house. He got in the truck with Lawrence Howard, who met him there, and before they even got into anything, Howard shows him his gun and said, "Just so you know, I'm packing." Right? And Delsa said, "Okay." And of course he wasn't, because he had to fly to California, right? So Howard proceeds to drive him up to Howard's house, where they sat down and they had a little chat. And immediately after that, after Howard had brought Delsa and his partner back down to their car, and Howard left. Now, I wish that Delsa would have given some specifics about their conversation, and I'm sure he did. I just don't remember the audio. I just remember certain parts of it, like the part I'm telling you now. But he looked at his partner and he said, he had one of those gut feelings like homicide cops often do after talking to suspects and things of that nature. And he looked dead in his partner's face, and he was like, "I think we just talked to the guy that shot Kennedy."
Yeah.
And his partner was like, "Yeah, I think so." Now, the Delsa New Orleans part of the HSCA investigation was shut down not too long after this. They pretty much shut them down, said, no more money to be looking into this kind of thing over here. They were nearing wrapping up their thing anyway, and nobody ever did anything with it. But I wish to God that audio, I mean, I'm sure Fetzer has it, but it's not like I can call Fetzer and be like, "Hey man, you still got that L.J. Delsa interview?" Kind of burned that bridge a long time ago, I think. But just it's the small things that really make your ears perk up. And when you take these things individually, they might not seem like a lot. But when you start to put them all together in a picture. Okay, you have Beckham saying this, you have Delsa saying this, you have Hall saying this, and you can see what Howard was involved in. He's one of these guys that chose to leave his family behind and go do something that he believed so strongly enough in to quit his job and leave his family behind, leave his kids behind, and go fight for.
Yeah,
And
risk your freedom and risk your life.
yeah. And it was no joke. These guys were getting arrested multiple times for multiple things.
Yeah.
So in January of 1968, the CIA, of course, were interested in what Garrison was doing down there. So these internal memos are basically trying to figure out if any of these people that Garrison was looking into had any CIA connections, verifiable. And this is their reference on Lawrence J. Howard, also known as Escorido and Alonzo, Fat Larry, the Mexican. See also Hemming, Gerald Patrick Jr., and Lauren Eugene Hall. As known associates. Allegation: Lawrence J. Howard of Los Angeles was subpoenaed by Garrison as a material witness on 29 December 67. He was ordered to appear before the New Orleans Parish Grand Jury on 1 and 2 February 68. CIA connection, none verifiable. Source: newspaper clippings from December 29th and December 30th, 67, which we'll get into here in a second. Negative for the OS indices results. Office of Security, that would be. Negative excerpt for a reference to subject's name in a newspaper clipping dated 5 December 62 in the file of Gerald P. Hemming Jr. The article reported that 13 men were arrested at Sombrero Key, Florida, on charges of violating U.S. neutrality laws by an attempt to form an expedition to invade a foreign country. Gerald Patrick Hemming was identified as the leader of the group, and Lawrence J. Howard Jr., 27, of Pico Rivera, California, as one of his merry band of invaders. The invaders claimed they were an independent unit not affiliated with any Cuban exile organization. Details: the Washington Star newspaper clipping dated 30 December 67 described Howard as a welder and pipe fitter who was reported by his wife to be somewhere in Mexico and unavailable for comment regarding the subpoena from Garrison. So he's laying low. His wife saying he's somewhere in Mexico, which I doubt that he was.
Yeah. Well, didn't him and Hall go to Mexico for a while after the assassination? I've heard that. I've never.
Yes, that is alleged. Again, more than likely just laying low somewhere after the assassination. Don't know if they actually went to Mexico.
Hey, I hope they got their payday before they went.
But it would make sense considering, that people thought he was a Mexican. You go somewhere, you're going to blend in with hundreds or millions of other people. I mean, if you don't want to be found, go to Mexico,
Yeah.
Now, when he was arrested in December 1962 for violation of the Neutrality Act, he was released the next day on his own recognizance, authorized by the U.S. Commission of something. I don't know what. It's cut off. But their sheet basically states that Lawrence John Howard Jr., race white. Okay.
Wait, race white?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Sex male. 5'11", 236, black hair, brown eyes. Date of birth, January 17th, 35 in Los Angeles, California. Tattoos, Right upper arm, a flower and tattoo. Left upper arm, twin heart tattoos. I mean, he loved his wife enough to get twin heart tattoos of her, but he didn't love her enough to stay with her. He
I need,
chose this ideology over his wife.
hey, that comes second. The wife.
His address in 1962 was General Delivery, Big Pine Key, Florida. Social Security number unknown. Now, I believe this is from the FBI, who, like I said, were watching the Garrison investigation very closely. And this is their analysis of several newspaper articles that were popping up about these guys. Excuse me. Let's see. The article reported that in October of 63, a number of the key figures in Garrison's probe converged upon Dallas. The Free Cuba group was installed in a house in Harlandale, which Joe mentioned earlier, which is in South Oak Cliff, past Ruby's apartment. On October the 3rd, the evening he returned from Mexico, Oswald checked into the YMCA on North Irvay Street and remained there for 2 days. The same 2 days, the room next to him was occupied by a Cuban-appearing young man who registered as R. Narvaez. On the night of October 17th, this is less than 2 weeks later, Lauren Hall and Lawrence Howard Jr. arrived at the same YMCA. They checked out on October 22nd. The article commented that the arrival of Hall possibly dovetails with the story of a new witness located by Garrison. The witness stated that in 1963, Hall was short of funds and petitioned him for assistance in the anti-Castro movement. He declined, but lent Hall $50, holding a .30-06 caliber rifle as collateral.
Yep.
Maybe we've heard about that rifle before.
Yeah, the Pathcock Payne
Yeah.
rifle in California that they pawned, of course.
About a month after the assassination, Hall redeemed the weapon, commenting that he was going to Dallas to meet with the wealthy oil man. The same oil man who Garrison knows posted bail for Hall and William Seymour when they were arrested in Dallas in mid-October. The article commented that the FBI had stripped Dallas police files of all pertinent material concerning the arrest, and that the FBI did not locate Hall, Howard, and Seymour until just before the Warren report went to press, which is what I was talking about before when they put them at the Odio residence. The files of the New Orleans office show that Lauren Hall, Lawrence Howard Jr. were involved in the investigation concerning the assassination of President Kennedy through the testimony of Sylvia Odio, who testified that she observed Oswald in the company of 2 Cuban or Mexican men sometime in late September or early October of 63. The files of the New Orleans office are incomplete concerning information furnished by Sylvia Odio during interviews by the FBI and are also incomplete concerning interviews with Lauren Hall and Lawrence Howard Jr. The Red Flash edition of the New Orleans State's item, December 29, 67, reported that Lauren Hall was subpoenaed by District Attorney Garrison as a witness in his assassination probe. The article reported that Garrison has information that Hall checked into the Dallas YMCA in October of 63 and remained in Dallas until the time of the assassination. Hall was in Dallas with Jack Ruby and other individuals believed to be involved in the assassination, that he brought a weapon to Dallas shortly before the assassination, that he was active in the Free Cuba movement in Florida, Louisiana, and Texas, and that he previously engaged in CIA-sponsored guerrilla training in Florida for raids on Cuba, and that he was in association with Oswald in Dallas. Before Hall's arrival in Dallas, he was in the New Orleans area and was in contact with David Ferry and other individuals who frequented 531 Lafayette Street. Identified as the same office building described as 544 Camp Street, the address used on leaflets handed out by Oswald in New Orleans. Hall allegedly, before the assassination, was present at discussions concerning it which of course we heard before in his own words.
Mhm.
The article reported that the subpoena for Lawrence Howard stated that information had been given to the DA that Howard was in association with Ferry in 63 during the course of visits to New Orleans, that Lawrence Howard was engaged in CIA-sponsored guerrilla training in Florida for raids on Cuba, that he was active in the Free Cuba movement in Florida, Louisiana, and Texas, and that he associated with Ferry and others at 531 Lafayette. The subpoena also says that Howard arrived in Dallas and checked into the YMCA in October of 1963 and stayed in Dallas until the time of the Kennedy assassination. The subpoena claims Howard was in contact with Ruby and other individuals believed to be involved in the assassination, unquote. In the Bakersfield Californian on January 3rd, 1968, the Associated Press in New Orleans had reported from New Orleans that Hall, while saying he disliked President Kennedy, denied any knowledge of a conspiracy to kill him. Hall was also quoted as saying he would not return voluntarily to New Orleans, but if a court directed him to do so, I naturally will go, he said. I have nothing to hide, he said, Joe. Now, I'm going to play this very brief other clip. Here we go.
Stands right now, there's only two of us left alive. That's me and Sano Trafficani. And as far as I'm concerned, we're both going to stay alive because I ain't going to say shit. The only thing I'm saying is any of you assholes come near me, you better have a fucking army with you, baby, because I've got my shit together, and I'll blow the first one of you motherfuckers away that even comes near me. And that you can put in print.
Oof, I love it. I love it. That is an emotional Lauren Hall. And
Yeah.
being someone that has lost their temper way too many times and lost control of emotions, you could just tell that. I think it was A.J. Weberman who called him on that. At that point, he just didn't give a fuck. You know what I mean? Like, he didn't.
Yeah. He didn't.
He didn't. You could tell.
Yeah, and thanks to Turin Horse for the audio.
Yes, thank you, Turin.
Now, combine all this with something we've talked about here and on the Dallas Action. Doug's talked about it as well. Of the whole securing this 30-06 rifle before they went to Dallas, also securing a movie camera, which we talked about on this show not very long ago.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, you just don't do that kind of thing without having something in mind. And there's a whole reason that the FBI was knocking on Roy Payne's door the day after the assassination, asking about this rifle. He would not have done so unless they had actually found this rifle in Dallas and fingerprinted it and ran it back to Roy Payne and Lauren Hall.
Without a doubt.
Okay. And the fact that they bought a movie camera, not a shitty Zapruder camera. I'm talking a movie quality camera that in today's money would have cost, what did we say it was, $4,000 or $5,000?
What was the original amount?
I can't even remember.
Oh, times 10, whatever it was. Yeah, probably
$500 or something like that for the camera.
Yeah, then that's $5,000, which for people soliciting funds for their movement, $5,000 is nothing to sneeze at.
Yeah, and he wrote it on a check for the Free Cuba Committee. He had a blank check, and I had the receipt. Remember?
Yep.
They bought the camera earlier.
Yep.
The new witness referred to in the article could possibly be Richard Hathcock, Allied International Detective Agency, Los Angeles, California, who was interviewed by the FBI on November 23rd, 1963. It's right here in black and white in the FBI document. I just told you. Somebody was knocking from the FBI on this guy's door the day after the assassination asking about this rifle.
Yep.
For a reason.
Yeah, it's not random.
No.
that you could understand if it's random, if it's like 2-3 weeks after or whatever. This is November 23rd, the following day.
Yeah. Hathcock advised that approximately a year prior to the interview, that Jerry Patrick Hemming, whose true name is Jerry Hemming, and Lorenzo Pasio, also known as Lorenzo Hall or Skip Hall, came to Hathcock's office stating that they were broke and needed money. Patrick and Pasio had with them a set of golf clubs and a 30-06 Johnson semi-automatic rifle with Bushnell variable powered scope, on which Hathcock loaned them $100, $50 on each item. Hathcock reported that on November 18, 1963, Lauren Hall came in with $50 and retrieved the rifle. I'm sorry, September 18th, 63, Lorenzo Hall and Lawrence Howard came in with $50 and retrieved the rifle. Hathcock advised that both Patrick and Hall are violently anti-Castro, and both told them that they had fought in the mountains with Castro in Cuba, however, fell out with him after the revolution. All right, fast forward to Lawrence Howard and the Garrison investigation. February 27th, 1968, Lawrence Howard Jr., a witness in District Attorney Jim Garrison's assassination probe, told newsmen here last night that he had been to New Orleans, talked with Garrison, and found him, quote, a very nice guy.
It's a good guy.
He's a good guy. Howard was subpoenaed as a material witness by Garrison and successfully fought extradition. But he said over the weekend he was coming to New Orleans voluntarily to testify. Newsmen in New Orleans did not see him at the courthouse yesterday. The DA's office was closed today for Mardi Gras. Howard told LA reporters that he used the check Garrison sent him for travel expenses. He did not say whether he would return to New Orleans for a formal grand jury appearance. The grand jury meets Thursday. Howard said he expects Garrison to issue a statement in the next few days clearing his name. He had not been accused of any wrongdoing. Then the next day, talked with DA in New Orleans. Howard, Kennedy assassination probe witness Lawrence Howard Jr. said Tuesday in Los Angeles after returning from New Orleans, where he conferred with District Attorney Jim Garrison, that Garrison is, quote, a very fine person and sincere in his investigation. Quote, I now feel he is definitely on to something, and the direction of his investigation is the right one. End quote. He added he spent 4.5 hours talking with Garrison Tuesday, clearing up a number of things, but declined to give details. Howard, now a 32-year-old unemployed welder of El Monte, California, successfully fought extradition to Louisiana as a material witness in the probe. But during the past week, he announced he'd come to New Orleans voluntarily. Asked why he changed his mind, Howard said he wanted to clear his name and he felt he could help the investigation if he could. So again, we don't know exactly what they talked about in those 4.5-hour interview with Jim Garrison, but apparently it was enough for Garrison to lay off of him and Hall. Because he continued to pursue Beckham. He thought Beckham was full of shit and not telling him stuff. But these two guys, he kind of let slide for whatever reason.
Yeah, that's very interesting because wasn't there some allegations regarding Hall and Garrison and the things that were stolen out of his apartment and Weisberg? I think there was a whole bunch of drama there.
Yeah, we'll get into more of that when we talk about Hall. It was more. Okay. It was more on him at that time.
Fair enough.
So fast forward to June of 1975. Okay, this is pre-HSCA.
Mm-hmm.
This is an FBI Airtel to Hoover from Special Agent in Charge in Buffalo. Okay. On June 24th, 1975, Joe, Richard Monroe Margison of Webster Road, Wyoming County, New York, telephone number, blah, 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 was interviewed at his residence, and he advised as follows. Margison is a white male cracker, Joe. We call him that. Yeah. Born June 16th and 27 at Rochester, New York. He attended 4 years of high school, yet still received no high school diploma. He completed a 2-year correspondence course in traffic management and a 1-year correspondence course in law.
Traffic like car traffic?
I don't know. It's all it says. This is a correspondence course in traffic management and 1 year in law. Correspondence course. I'm a professional. He was previously employed as a can machine mechanic for TJ Lipton Company in Albion, New York, until he was laid off in October of 74 and has been unemployed since that time. However, Margison is a farmer and operates the farm at his residence and breeds and raises poodles, much like your dear little Ruby.
Ruby, say hi, Ruby. You're sleeping.
Margison and his wife resided in Los Angeles, California from 1950 through 1972. In 1960, Margison secured a position as a material handler for the Recall Corporation on Slauson. What's up? Crip. In Los Angeles. He was residing on Trigg Street in East Los Angeles at that time, which Margison described as an area chiefly comprised of Negroes and Mexicans. During 1960, Margison met the Mexican Lawrence J. Howard Jr., who was a welder at the Recall Corporation. So he's a co-worker of Lawrence Howard in 1960. Okay. At that time, he said that Howard was in his late 20s or early 30s, was approximately 6 feet in height, close to 300 pounds, large build, black hair, brown eyes, medium complexion, and wore a large Fu Manchu mustache. Certainly sounds like Larry, right?
Yeah.
Howard's residence was only a few blocks away from where Margison lived. Howard was married, and his wife, whose name is unknown to Margison, was a Mexican and was employed by the telephone company. Also, Howard had a side piece named Josephine, last name unknown, who was
AKA
also
a Gumar.
Yes, a Gumar, who was also of Mexican heritage and who lived only a few blocks from Margison as well.
Bold. Respect.
During most of 1960, the employees of Recall Corporation were the members of the United Auto Workers Union Local were on strike. Howard was the leader of the education committee of this union, and Margison was a member of the committee. The striking employees were replaced by Recall Corporation with some scabs, some out-of-state employees, in order to maintain the Recall Corporation's operations. Although Howard and Margison devoted some of their time to the union activities, both had ample time to sit around and talk shit about camping, hunting, guns, and fast draw contests. Draw. Because of their common employment, and since they were both avid gun and hunting buffs, Howard and Margison spent a considerable amount of time together.
Wait, this is his Gumar?
No, this is Howard and Margison.
Okay.
There was a lot of publicity regarding Castro in Cuba at the time, and it soon became common knowledge. Like I said, this is in 1960. This is before he started with the this is before Bay of Pigs and all that shit. So this is before.
Right.
There was a lot of publicity regarding Castro in Cuba at the time, and it soon became common knowledge in the area where Margison resided that recruiting efforts were being made, particularly among Spanish-speaking people, for volunteers to organize into an anti-Castro group. Howard became interested in this anti-Castro movement and decided to become involved in helping to recruit volunteers for the movement. Although Margeson was spending most of his time researching possible lost gold mines, he sometimes accompanied Howard in his recruiting efforts. So, shocker, the white guy is trying to find lost gold mines.
A valiant effort.
Yeah. Howard and Margeson would drive around at night in the areas where Cuban refugees were living in Los Angeles and attempt to recruit volunteers for an anti-Castro group at gas stations, parking lots, and other places where desperate Cubans would congregate.
That would be a great job, just to be a fly on the wall for that.
Listen, man, you trying to get some guns and go shoot this motherfucker? What?
Yeah, like Castro.
So, Margeson was unable to understand most of these conversations because Howard was speaking to the Cubans in Spanish, and Margeson does not understand that language because he's a cracker. The purpose of these efforts was to recruit a volunteer guerrilla army and raise funds to train and support this army for an invasion into Cuba. Margeson commented that he observed the volatile Latin temperament displayed by Howard, other Mexican Americans, and Cuban refugees, and that this temperament possibly explains their extreme emotions in connection with the anti-Castro movement. So he's seen all this stuff firsthand. He's seen these pissed off anti-Castro Cubans, Mexicans, and whoever else, Latinos that they're talking to. He's getting the sentiment from Howard of, hatred and whatever's driving them to do this,
Mm-hmm.
So sometime during 1961, Howard went to Florida for the purpose of training volunteers for the guerrilla army, which was to invade Cuba. Howard seemed particularly suited for this activity in view of his expertise in handling firearms and knives. Howard told Margeson he had served in the U.S. Army and had received a medical discharge because of an injury to his foot. Margeson had noticed that Howard limped a little after he had been walking for a long period of time. Margeson received a postcard from Howard, and the postcard was from Marathon Key in the Florida Keys. Howard mentioned Big Pine and Little Pine as being nearby Marathon Key, and Margeson assumed that the guerrilla warfare training was taking place in that area. So far, everything checks out.
Yeah.
He's getting some facts right. Howard returned to Los Angeles after several months, arriving sometime in 1962. Accompanying Howard was a man named Rudy Hernandez, a white man of Mexican descent in his 20s, 5'2" in height, big bastard.
Short guy.
Stocky build, black hair, dark complected. Also accompanying Howard was a white male, age mid-20s, 5'8" to 5'9", 150 to 165, slender build, whom Margeson knew only as Slim. Howard,
Where did Slim come up? It was the was it the guy we talked, Andre Cordrescu, and Kerry Thornley, the guy in New Orleans was named Slim. I probably no relation, but
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Howard resided with his wife in their home near Margeson's residence, as we said, and Hernandez and Slim stayed at somewhere called the Olive Hotel on Olive Street in Los Angeles. Hernandez, Slim, and Margeson obtained employment painting and refurbing the old Union Temple building, located behind the Los Angeles Greyhound bus station, which was supervised by a man named Jack Casey. This building reportedly housed the Marquade printing shop in the basement, which at that time was engaged in printing the original draft of Richard Nixon's book after he lost the presidential election. Howard, Hernandez, and Slim began talking about a man called Tex, who was coming to Los Angeles from New Orleans. From their comments, Margison learned that Tex was not involved in the guerrilla training in Florida, but that Tex was apparently considered to be a very important person by Margison's friends. They indicated that Tex was one of their people and implied that he had something to do with the Cuban invasion. Howard had mentioned that on his way back to Los Angeles from Florida, he had driven a car from New Orleans to LA for a company involved in deadheading or relocating cars. In late 62 or early 63, Tex arrived in Los Angeles and roomed with Hernandez and Slim at the Olive Hotel. Margison described Tex as a white male, again in his mid-20s or early 30s, 5'8" to 5'9" in height, 150 to 160, slender build, brown hair, medium complexion. Margison was curious about Tex because of the fuss made over him by his friends. And prior to Tex's arrival, Margison approached Howard with a suggestion of having Tex to his home for dinner. Howard's first reaction was one of reluctance, but eventually he conceded, and when Tex arrived, Margison drove to the Olive Hotel in order to take Tex back to his house for dinner. Margison found that it was very difficult to make conversation with Tex. Many times Tex would not reply to a question and generally had a very dull personality. Tex told Margison that he had never been in LA area before. In anticipation of introducing Tex to his wife, Margison asked Tex his name. At first, Tex hesitated, but then told Margison his name. Although Margison is not positive, he believes that Tex gave the name of Lee Harvey or Harvey Lee. Margison said he recalls these names through word association based on the fact that he has a relative by the name of Lee and another relative by the name of Harvey. After eating a delicious home-cooked meal, Tex did not even bother to thank Margison or his wife. Tex also began working in the old Union Temple building with Hernandez, Slim, and Margison. The supervisor of this work, Jack Casey, was seldom on the job, and therefore Margison and the others spent only a small amount of their time actually working, with most of their time being devoted to bull sessions. Tex gave the impression that he was a rough and tumble type person who liked the idea of guerrilla type warfare. However, Margison was told by the others that Tex had received an undesirable or bad conduct discharge from the military. Margison did not hold this against Tex since Margison received a bad conduct discharge from the military. Tex frequently talked about making big money, and his schemes usually involved violence. As an example, Margison recalled Tex talking about a guerrilla-type raid on a diamond mine in Peru, which everyone in the mine would be killed and a fortune in diamonds would be seized. Tex mentioned something about a $50,000 reward for Castro's head. One of Tex's peculiarities was determining how quickly he could get from the top of the building in which they were working to the lobby, and he would frequently challenge someone to a race. Sound familiar? Let's see how fast we can get from the top floor to the bottom floor. Margison said he did not know how Tex got from the top of the building to the lobby because they took different routes in their races, but he thought Tex might be sliding down the elevator cables. In one of their bull sessions, Margison asked Tex if he and his group had any contact with the CIA. In response, Tex took a scrap of paper out of his wallet and showed it to him. This scrap of paper had a name and telephone number on it. Margison cannot recall the name, but remembers that it was the name of a prominent family in the South. Tex's purpose in showing Margison this name was to show Margison that he had connections with important people. Tex stayed for about 1 month and then left the LA area, not indicating where he was going. And Margison never heard from Tex again. Hernandez and Slim left at the same time, but Margison does not know if they left together. During the time that Margison and the others were working at the old Union Temple, Howard never came to that building. and Martinson got the impression that Howard intentionally avoided being seen with that group at that building, but Martinson did not know the reason. Now, after the Bay of Pigs incident, Martinson asked Howard what he intended to do since the Cuban invasion had failed. And although Howard had never made any statements, Martinson felt Howard implied that he or someone associated with the anti-Castro movement intended to do something very spectacular and to blame it on Castro. This incident was to be so horrendous as to put the United States government in such a position that they would be forced to openly invade Cuba. Now, here's where it gets good. Around October of 63, Martinson moved from Trigg Street to East 53rd Street from LA to Maywood, California, and he lost contact with Howard. Now, at that time, Howard was working for a trailer manufacturer on Whittier Boulevard in LA. Martinson saw Howard's name and address in the LA Times in connection with Howard being subpoenaed by former District Attorney Garrison in New Orleans. Martinson and his wife drove to this address, which he believes was in San Gabriel or South San Gabriel, in order to see Howard and talk over old times. Martinson recalled that Howard resided near Rosemead Boulevard. When Martinson and his wife arrived at Howard's residence, there was a truck camper parked in the driveway with a Cadillac parked behind it. Martinson rang the doorbell and could hear voices inside through the partially open front door. Howard came to the door with an automatic pistol in his hand, Joe, looking out of the door cautiously to see who was knocking on his door. When Howard recognized me, he told me he was busy at the moment and asked me to return in about an hour. So when Martinson returned in an hour, Howard again came to the door with a pistol in his hand. Howard then put the pistol in his belt and invited Martinson inside. During the time they were talking, Martinson noted that there was another pistol on the telephone stand near the sofa, and Howard indicated during their discussion that he had 7 loaded guns in his house.
Yeah, he's not messing around.
It sounds exactly the type of shit that he did with LJ Delsa, right?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Howard told Martinson that things were a little tough since he had been subpoenaed to testify in New Orleans. He showed Martinson an envelope and said it contained his airplane tickets to New Orleans and a letter from Garrison. Martinson asked Howard if he were going to go to New Orleans to testify, and Howard answered that the man who had just been at his home, who was driving the Cadillac, was his attorney, and that he had been taking Howard's deposition so that Howard would not have to go testify. Howard said that if he were to go to New Orleans, that they might lock him up and lose the key. Howard told Martinson that his wife and 2 daughters were staying with his mother and that he was staying in his home alone because he feared for their lives. Howard commented that he did not know who could be an enemy and that he had to be very cautious at this time. Martinson commented that Howard was not the kind of person who ever seemed to be afraid of anything, but that he appeared very frightened at that time. Martinson believes that this visit took place in 1968. After this visit, Martinson lost contact with Howard. Martinson stated that he subsequently observed a great deal of national publicity in the various media concerning the arrest of Howard and 5 other individuals in a 38-foot boat off the Florida coast for a violation of the Neutrality Act. The names of the other 5 individuals were Cuban names. Howard was in possession of a 7mm or 32 caliber Browning automatic pistol that Martinson had previously sold to Howard. Martinson's curiosity concerning the activities of Howard, Hernandez, Slim, and Tex was aroused when the Watergate incident was receiving so much publicity. Martinson speculated that Howard, who always described himself as a soldier of fortune, must have been involved in President Kennedy's assassination, and that this was the incident Howard meant when he referred to something that would force the United States to invade Cuba. Martinson also speculated that Howard must have known E. Howard Hunt because Hunt spent time in Florida when he was with the CIA, and that Hunt would have known anyone such as Howard who was involved in training guerrillas for a possible invasion of Cuba. Martinson stated that he does not actually have any information that would connect Howard or any of Howard's friends with the assassination of Kennedy. He explained that he had lost a lot of free time since he lost his job in October of 74, and that he started thinking about these matters and formulating his own theories. He said that his memory had become somewhat hazy and that he is uncertain as to names and dates and other information. It was pointed out to Martinson that some of the information he had furnished was contradictory to that furnished by Sheriff Alan Capwell, as related by Capwell as having been told to him by Martinson earlier. Martinson stated that his only explanation is that Sheriff Capwell must have misunderstood what he was saying. It is noted that Martinson's home has the appearance of a one-room shack and was in a disorderly condition. Martinson was contacted at approximately 8:15 a.m. and still had not woken up. Although Martinson speaks relatively well, he appears to confuse fact with his own theories. Dallas, Los Angeles, and New Orleans evaluate results of the above interview and advise the Bureau. So, in 1975, he took it upon himself to contact the FBI and relay this information. Of course, this is, 10, 15 years after the fact. So, you are going to forget some things. Things might be starting to get a little hazy for you, depending on your lifestyle, things like that. There's some things in here that you might just be like, okay, this is a lot. But then some things perk you up and say, okay, well, this sounds legit, right?
Yeah.
So during the HSCA, Betsy Palmer, who was an investigator, I believe, from the HSCA, reviewed portions of files at the FBI on Thursday, October 20th, 1977. They related to Lawrence J. Howard Jr. The documents I saw are as follows, and she lists all of them. With the exception of 2 documents, all the material on Lawrence Howard Jr. was either known to us or of such little value that a review of the file contents is not warranted. The material was gathered largely in relation to the Garrison investigation of the assassination of President Kennedy. New info on Howard was supplied in document 7189, section 179, a synopsis follows. FBI memo to director from Buffalo, dated April 75, Sheriff Alan Capwell came to the Buffalo FBI to relate the following information obtained from Richard Margeson. So now we're going to see what Capwell told him, the FBI. That was maybe a little different than what Margeson told the FBI. Margeson stated that he was living in Los Angeles in 1962 and met Lawrence Howard, who was collecting funds for anti-Castro forces. Howard went to the Keys for 6 months and returned in late 62 with Rudy Hernandez and Unsub, a.k.a. Slim, a white male, 5'8", 5'9", in his 20s. All were employed by Jack Casey to paint and refurb the old Union Temple. Through these people, Martinson met a man named Tex who arrived from New Orleans in late 62 or early 63. He described him as a hitman in his late 20s, 5'6" to 5'9", slender, 135 pounds, former military and rotten disposition. He furnished his name as Lee Harvey. Martinson came forward with this information after seeing a TV documentary regarding the Warren Commission, which said Oswald was in Russia in 62 of 63, which, of course, he wasn't in Russia in 63.
Yeah.
And only half 62.
Yeah, mass down in like June.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
What this guy sounds like, Joe, of course, it's obviously not the real Lee Harvey Oswald, right? Because we know where he was at this time. But it could be a person.
Crayford? California?
No. It could be a person impersonating Oswald, as it sounds a lot like the visitor to the Odios.
Mm-hmm.
Remember how they described him as very brash and loudmouthed?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And said, basically that he's identifying himself as Lee Harvey, which is odd, but former Marine, same deal. And it sounds like the same guy that the Odios met in the company of Howard and Hall.
Yeah.
Let's see. Additional information on Howard was obtained in file 62-whatever. It involves an interview with Richard Lubick after the assassination of Robert F. Kennedy. Lubick was closely associated with Kennedy during the California primary and traveled with him. The interview with Lubick was conducted on June 25th, 68. RFK was assassinated on June 4th, 68. Lubick states that Stephen Jaffe of Jim Garrison's staff contacted him in May of 68, trying to arrange a meeting between Garrison and Kennedy, the purpose of which was for Garrison to warn Kennedy of a possible attempt on his life. Lubick worked through Frank Mankiewicz to set up the meeting, but Mankiewicz later reported that RFK was not interested in meeting with Garrison. The FBI report to the director from SAC Los Angeles was titled Kinsault. According to Lubick, Stephen Jaffe related a conspiracy story to Lubick, who in turn asked him to repeat the information to Ron Buck, a LA attorney and partner of Pierre Salinger in the operation of The Factory, a nightclub in Los Angeles. Jaffe claimed that the committee had placed $10 million in the hands of a secondary group to locate appropriate individuals to carry out the assassination of John F. Kennedy. He claims Edgar Eugene Bradley and Lawrence Howard were members of this group. According to Jaffe, Jim Garrison claims the committee, or as Beckham calls them, the organization, is composed of National States Rights Party members, anti-Castro Cubans, oil depletion interests, and persons opposed to the U.S. policy of rapprochement with the communists. This conspiracy story of Jaffe's is similar to the one this committee had received from Lila Hurtado, also known as Libra. Ron Buck figures prominently in the Libra claims of a conspiracy. Jaffe and Hurtado's reliability need to be checked if there's any interest in pursuing this angle. I also found an interest in Section 105-8255 dealing with Don Haley of the National Enquirer, who was seeking information about the Sylvia Odio incident. This document had a notation that a 5-page memo designated top secret third agency had been destroyed. Now, according to Jerry Hemming, both Howard and Hall met with Lee Harvey Oswald in Texas while en route to Florida prior to the JFK assassination. So this is coming from Hemming, so take it with a grain of salt, if you will.
Yeah.
After President Kennedy was killed, Hemming related to source that he felt the assassination was a CIA plot to do away with Kennedy, since Howard and Hall were believed to have been connected in some way with the CIA. Source at a later date confronted Howard with the question concerning his part in the alleged connection with the Kennedy assassination, and Howard clammed up and became nervous concerning the matter and avoided talking about the subject entirely. In a letter from Thomas Bethall to Edward J. Epstein in July of 67, says this: "We were recently paid an unannounced visit by two Americans who were intimately connected with Cuban exile groups in the summer of 63. One, a Jerry Patrick Hemming, was even dressed in fatigues. The main purpose of their visit seemed to be to point an authoritative finger of suspicion at Hall, Howard, and Seymour, to an extent that we began to wonder if they knew that others were involved and were trying to protect them. Jerry Patrick told me the following story, which I thought might interest you. According to Patrick, he usually drops to Hemming, there were in 1963 numerous teams with paramilitary inclinations out to, quote, get Kennedy. Some of these teams had been approached by wealthy entrepreneurs of the H.L. Hunt type, Joe, who were interested in seeing the job done and even provided financial assistance. Then on November 22nd, Kennedy is shot down on the streets. And then for 2 years or so, there the story rests. However, since all the mounting controversy of the last 12 months, a startling new development has occurred, according to Patrick. Recently, members of the, quote, teams have been returning to their sponsors, taking credit for the assassination and asking for money. At the same time, requesting large additional sums of money so that they won't be tempted to talk about it to anyone. In turn, the sponsors have apparently been hiring mafia figures to rid themselves of these blackmailers. Jerry Patrick admitted that his own association with some of these extremist groups in '63 have recently been causing him a little concern. Incidentally, this may very well be the true story behind the Eladio Del Valle murders in Miami, reported this spring in the National Enquirer. And in this, a John Keelan review of Noel Twyman's book, Bloody Treason. Chapter 27 is a long account of the author's interviews with and analysis of Jerry Patrick Hemming. Hemming is a figure whose exact ties to the case have always been unclear to me, but this is a fine example of bloody treason being loaded with, if not new evidence, at least a lot of information that has not been brought together like this before, as far as I know. Twyman says that unnamed, quote, prominent researchers had warned him not to take Hemming seriously, or bloody treason would be completely discredited. But I am glad he did take him seriously, going so far as to meet with him on a number of occasions and probe his story in depth. Hemming is mentioned throughout the assassination literature. The author fills in much of Hemming's background. He performed a paramilitary group as a teenager and demonstrates now how his later activities, specifically his group Interpen, may have been involved in the JFK assassination plot or plots. Hemming comes across as very credible in these pages. Now, the reason I bring up Hemming, and he's not really a prime suspect as being operational in Dealey Plaza, of course, because we cannot put Jerry Patrick Hemming in Dealey Plaza in November on the 22nd of 1963.
Yeah.
But he was definitely in a position to hear about and know about his cohorts doing these things.
Yeah.
And when you know information, it's almost as bad as having actually been there yourself. You know what I'm saying? And we know how Hemming operates. He sprinkles truth in with a lot of bullshit, right?
Yes.
While he never actually came out and said the actual truth, at least we don't know if he did allude to certain things over time, right? So, I would highly recommend Bloody Treason. Someone would have talked if you want to learn a lot more about the real story of these real hardcore operator mercenary soldiers of fortune types that you can actually put in Dallas in November of 1963. And given the broad spectrum of all of the pieces of the puzzle, that go along with these guys that put them in the position to do something, actually do something. You hear reports of Dealey Plaza. You hear reports of a shot from the knoll or from the South Knoll or the overpass area or the Dow Tex building. There's lots of places for these people to be. The roof of the Dallas County Records building. It would take a operational team of folks, a very tight-knit group of operators that can be trusted.
That have worked together before.
Right.
Yes. This wasn't their first operation together.
Right. Because going into something like this, of course, the object is to, A, get the job done. B, not get caught doing it. Okay. So you have to formulate a very specific plan and to ensure that that doesn't happen. Right. And you have to have very, very good minded people in this type of thing. This caught Dallas off guard. This caught the DPD off guard. This caught the Secret Service off guard. So when you catch people off guard, it often leads to a lot of mistakes. But we do have indications of movement and people being behind the fence, back in the rail yard, who, if you can believe what they say, you have a spotter and you have a shooter. And, the shooter, tosses the rifle to the spotter, breaks it down, throws it in the trunk or puts it somewhere, and they're ghosts at that point. You know what I mean? And you formulate a plan that allows you to get away scot-free, whether you're coming down off the 6th floor of the school book depository, whether you're coming down out of the Dow Tech's building, or whether you're coming down off the roof of the Dallas County Records building, whatever the case may be. It's not like we just heard. I mean, there's plenty of witnesses who say they heard 3, 4, 5 shots in Dealey Plaza. Orville Nix said he heard 4 or 5 shots.
Mm-hmm.
And from just viewing the Zapruder film, I think everybody's pretty clear that at least one of those shots came from the front. So when you put all of these things together, who could plan this? Who could pull it off? Who would actually do it? Who could actually get away with doing it and manage to keep their mouth shut, right? For the most part, except for the ones who maybe tried blackmail and didn't work out so well for them. But, there was a lot of this stuff going on back then. So that is just 2 of the folks we wanted to focus on here this evening for our Operational and Dealey Plaza series, part 1. Of course, we'll have part 2 next week, where we will continue our examination of who we think were some of the prime movers and shakers in Dealey Plaza. Ain't that right, Joe?
That is right, sir. That is correct. And I think the key point here is what of these suspects were operational, and which were in and around Dallas in late November '63. And it's easy to put a lot of people there based on this or that or one person's statement, but you really have to look through the documents and look at what these people were doing. Were they risking their lives on a monthly basis doing crazy shit? Felipe Vidal Santiago was killed 4 or 5 months after the assassination, assassinated by Castro, a firing squad, after his failed raid in Cuba. These are the type of people that would take the risk, which is, I don't want to say it's a quite suicide mission, but it's close. You have to be really you have to be really gung-ho about the ideology. You really do.
Yeah. And to tie this back, I've always said, you got to think about Dallas and New Orleans as separate entities. You have to somehow figure out what was going on in New Orleans with Oswald and somehow tie it to Dallas. And as you heard tonight, sometimes you can tie it to Dallas. If these guys were hanging around, I mean, we know they were driving through New Orleans for sure. You get from Dallas to Florida. Now, if they're stopping there as well and they're interacting with other anti-Castro Cubans, such as Sergio Arcacha Smith, who's, of course, tight with David Ferry, and Guy Bannister, right? And they needed to come up with a good plan, to get away with this. Of course, you need somebody to take the fall very quickly. for this. And this, the setup of Oswald, of course, happened in New Orleans, where he was sheep dipped into being a pro Castro supporter, and the whole AJ Heidel nonsense and all that. So that is an essential part of the plan. And of course, if these guys are sitting around having a bull session and talking to Bannister and Ferry, they probably think, I got just the guy for you. He's got the right background. He's already been passing out all this literature for me to try to out all these Reds here in New Orleans. He's an idiot. He won't even suspect a thing. He like money. And they figured out a way to do it.
Yeah. Let's send him to Mexico City.
And it just so happened that Oswald had the right ties to the FBI, the CIA, where they didn't want anybody really looking too hard at this guy if he was an FBI informant, if he did do something for the CIA when it comes to, going to Russia to be a false defector or anything like that. You don't want people digging too much. And you got to remember who they put on the Warren Commission.
Yep.
Allen Dulles.
Yep.
Former head of the CIA at the time that Oswald was in Russia. He was a guy who knew where the line was.
Mm-hmm.
You don't go below this line, or you start digging up these bones. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think the plotters really crushed it with Oswald, picking Oswald as a patsy, because they literally made the CIA and the FBI go into cover your ass mode.
Yeah,
it was a poison pill, and it was ingenious. I have to say, it was ingenious because the plotters knew that they would have to cover up their relationship with Oswald, whether that was witting or unwitting, and whatever.
You don't want to antagonize a war with Cuba,
or give up your
Russia.
top operations in Mexico City and others, right?
Right.
And
you start digging too much into Cuba and Russia and Oswald, and then you start uncovering all of this other stuff.
Yeah, there were a lot of reasons
to know about. And like I said before, all of these documents, they never thought that these things would ever see the light of day to the average citizen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This is all for their benefit, and it's like we get a chance to actually look and see what they were talking about. And they were watching these guys heavily down in Florida, these anti-Castro Cubans.
Yeah.
And they were definitely using them. The CIA was definitely using these guys. They are cutouts. They are, what is the word I'm looking for here? Plausible deniability, right? Yeah. If these guys get caught doing this stuff, they don't have any verifiable on paper relationship to the CIA at all if they're getting paid off the books.
Mm-hmm.
It's all a verbal thing.
Yeah.
A cash thing. If that's what's happening, it's not going to be written down, that, hey, we're paying these guys to do this. We know they were funding these anti-Castro groups in New Orleans and Florida.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you also have the issue of CIA funding some of these groups and the FBI trying to stop them, or a lot of the Neutrality Act thing. So you have these different.
Well, that's more of an overt thing, so that the government has deniability to say, look, we're trying to stop these cowboys from doing this shit to you guys, from running down there and trying to start things, inadvertently start World War III, but in actuality, they're funding them. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I think the goals of the different agencies were different, right? The CIAs would have been maybe different than the FBIs, who were maybe trying to stop it, and the CIA funding them. It's a whole mess of different agendas, and different agendas, like we talked about, within the exile and mercenary and soldier of fortune groups too. Everyone had their own agendas. So which agendas kind of came together, and I think two of the prime suspects that Rob and I talked about today, could definitely make a good case for, having their own agenda, but also kind of nudge combining with other agendas of different agencies. It's extremely complicated, and that's why this continues to be one of the most intriguing murder mysteries that there is. But
Absolutely. So sorry for the long ass show tonight, but it's a lot of information that needs to be dispensed. That's why this is part 1.
yeah, imagine if we did part 2, it'd be like 5 hours.
Yeah, we only did 2 guys tonight. I mean, come on. So that's going to do it for tonight. I guess next Wednesday, of course, the preview show, you already know what we're going to talk about. So I'm guessing, Joe, we're going to do something else for the members only stream next week. Don't know what yet, but it'll definitely be something. It always is something.
Yeah. I mean, we yap like 6 barbers. I think we had like an hour, 20 minutes this past Wednesday. Last Wednesday was like 2+ hours. It's definitely worth your while if you like to hear us yap like 6 barbers. And we definitely give thanks to all our supporters and members, covert operators, spooks, and the other one, super spies.
Yeah. So if you haven't yet and you'd like to be a part of those extra shows, click the join button down below this video. And like I said, you got to be a covert operator or higher to hang out with us every Wednesday night and get the extra shows. So please do. And we appreciate it immensely. And we have some great guests lined up for upcoming weeks. We just want to get through this first. Because we've been hitting guest after guest after guest after guest after guest for a while, so we want to break it up a little bit. We need to talk to Joe. So
yeah.
So yeah, join us Wednesday. We'll have another banger for you. And unfortunately, Joe, there is no way to play video here unless I do it from the browser. So I've created a workaround.
Okay.
It's minus the video, but I do have the audio. So we can.
So they get to look at us dance like fools.
Yes. Normally you can only see our hands as we dance. Maybe occasionally a face. But anyway, thanks for hanging out with us. Always a blast as usual. Yes. We hope you enjoyed it. And we'll see you next week. Pop.
Yes, pop.
Puppy. Poodles. Power.
Peace.
And turkey grease.
And some quiche.
Ruby's like, what the fuck is going on here?
The greatest lies are told in the name of truth. The greatest crimes are committed in the name of justice. The quotation is Jim Garrison's. It could be used for him or against him in this strange case. Good night.